Hello class, welcome to week 2 of our virtual classroom, week 10 on the calendar. And so what we're going to cover today in 2 parts is chapter 9 and 10, personal identity and personal relationships. Our agenda for this week, the things that we want to cover and talk about, discuss, etc. Quiz 7, which covers the previous 2 chapters. You're going to want to make sure that if you haven't already, to take that. That's 1 of 4 that are left. These are all going to be in the course web, and they're all timed. You've got pretty much this week through to Saturday to take it. Then again, our topics for this week: identity and relationships. We're getting personal finally when it comes to human communication. We will talk this week about the second exam. That is next week in week 11. I haven't picked the day, but it's not going to be a heck of a lot different than the first one, except you're just going to be doing it remotely. We'll talk more about this week. It's going to basically be an open book exam. So I think it makes sense to try to make things as simple for you guys as possible. I'm going to be looking for a certain quality to the answers, of course, and going to want folks to absolutely avoid cutting and pasting answers. I'm going to be able to tell when that happens, and any kind of plagiarism. And so you're going to want to make sure that you write the answers on the short answer part in your own words and demonstrate an understanding of whatever the question's about. We'll also keep up with the discussions and the participation activities this week. Most of you seem like you're in gear, so keep that up. Those of you who haven't, please pick that up. We've taken some points away from the last 2 exams and added those to discussions now, so please make sure that you participate in those. And then there's going to be activities for participation points as usual, and I'm going to be calculating your overall participation also just from seeing what activity that you are engaging in the course web and your login information, that thing. And then this week we'll also talk some more about the term paper. I did put up a short video explaining the instructions for that. We'll talk more about that as well. So let's get into the material. We're going to talk about the self, which is multidimensional, and how society and others shape it. It arises through communication. This is a communication class, and there's different approaches called reflected appraisal, direct definition, social comparison, self-disclosure, and social construction. Communicating with ourselves, we're going to reflect on social perspectives, personal growth, and a supportive context. We're also going to talk about personal relationships, features, the stages that you go through in all your relationships, and the evolution of relationships. There are relationships come in all shapes and sizes, of course, and they last. Some last for a long time, for a lifetime, and some are much shorter. But they all go through certain stages in evolution. And probably won't spend a lot of time on this, but we will talk about communication and relationships and some of the challenges that go along with that, which include managing distance, ensuring equity, and intimate relationships. The self is an ever-changing system of perspectives that is formed and sustained in communication with others and ourselves. This definition highlights several important aspects of personal identity. First, it points out that the self consists of perspectives that grow out of communication. Second, this definition emphasizes that the self is not static or fixed, but dynamic. Each of us evolves and changes throughout life. And finally, the definition highlights communication as a critically important influence on who we are and how we see ourselves. So there are many facets to the self. There's the physical self, of course, and then there's the emotional self. And they're all contained in one person, but they are part of that person's whole, but there are different aspects to it. We also have to fulfill roles in our lives. We have our social selves and our professional selves. The self is not innate, not something that we were just born with. It's social construction. It's constructed in our communication over time. And other people affect us, including what are called particular others or significant others, family and close friends, etc., and generalized other, just kind of society. Of course, society shapes the self, and it's too bad we don't have more time to really dig deeply into this. But one's race, one's gender, one's sexual orientation, one's socioeconomic status really affect our sense of selves, of course. And so just ponder on your own how these might affect your own sense of self. And as you can see from the title there, the subtitle is Dimensions of Inequality. So this is the society we live in, and not everything's equal. Hopefully we're working on that. We're becoming a more equal society, but we still have those challenges. Particular others, which are mostly family and friends, which include culture and our social communities, strongly shape us, of course. There's an activity that I'm going to ask you to do later this week, and the directions will be posted, how our backgrounds and our family and our friends shape us. Let's talk about something called attachment styles. This is something that's learned from experience, and we're going to talk about a few. What's the first attachment style? And attachment styles are just something that we learn from experience in our upbringing, and it really tends to affect us over the long haul. A secure attachment style is one that develops when a child's primary caregiver responds in a consistently attentive and loving way to a child. In response, the child develops a positive sense of self-worth. I am lovable, and a positive view of others. People are loving and can be trusted. People with secure attachment styles tend to be outgoing, affectionate, and able to handle the challenges and disappointments of close relationships without losing self-esteem. There's another attachment style called a fearful attachment style. That's cultivated when the primary caregiver communicates in negative, rejecting, or abusive ways with a child. Children who are treated this way often infer that they are unworthy of love and that others are not loving. Thus, they learn to see themselves as unlovable and others as rejecting. Not surprisingly, this leads them to be apprehensive about relationships. Although they often want close bonds with others, they fear others will not love them and they are not lovable. Thus, as adults, they tend to avoid others or feel insecure in relationships. Then we have what's called the dismissive attachment style. It's also promoted by caregivers who are uninterested in, rejecting of, or abusive toward children. People who develop this style do not accept the caregivers, few of them, as unlovable. Instead, they dismiss others as unworthy. So as you're seeing, people tend to react differently to how they're raised. And this is just one of the types. Consequently, children develop a positive view of themselves and a low regard for others and relationships. This prompts a defensive tendency to view relationships as unnecessary and undesirable. Then we have finally what's called the anxious ambivalent attachment style. This final pattern, which is the most complex of the four. Each of the other styles results from some consistent pattern of treatment by a caregiver. The anxious ambivalent style, however, is fostered by inconsistent treatment from the caregiver. Sometimes the adult is loving and attentive, yet at other times she or he is indifferent or rejecting. The caregiver's communication is not only inconsistent, but also unpredictable. He or she may respond positively to something a child does on Monday and react negatively to the same behavior on Tuesday. And this unpredictability creates great confusion in a child. So as you can see, this might be the most common of the styles, in that it's kind of a mix. Most of us aren't raised in an atmosphere that's completely supportive and positive, or one that's completely negative and critical, although some of us do grow up in that. Usually it's kind of a mix of the two. Okay, this is going to conclude the first part of our presentation for this week.